People think heartbreak is loud, shattering glass, screaming matches, dramatic exits. Mine was quiet. So quiet that I didn't even notice it bleeding until it was too late. When she left, she didn't take anything with her. Not the clothes she once stole from my closet. Not the books she annotated with tiny hearts. Not even the ring I bought too early, but loved too much. What she took was something I couldn't name then. A softness. A belief. A version of myself that only existed when her eyes held me. I thought time would stitch the wound shut. But it didn't. Because she didn't leave to forget me. She left to break me, publicly, beautifully, deliberately. And somehow, I let her. I watched her smile on screens where she denied ever loving me. I watched her laugh while using secrets I told her in the dark as punchlines. I watched her rise by carving pieces out of me. And I stayed silent. But silence has a strange power. It echoes until the truth becomes unbearable. The world thinks I'm the villain now. She made sure of that. But what she doesn't know is that the wound she created didn't close. It became a mirror. A story. A storm waiting to return to its maker. And storms always go back home. I first saw her on a rain-polished afternoon, the kind of day where the sky hangs low like a tired sigh, and the city glimmers as if freshly carved from silver. Water trickled along the edges of the sidewalk, catching the reflections of passing headlights like trembling stars. The air was cool enough to sting my lungs, and the world felt quieter than usual, as though waiting for something to begin. That's when my eyes found her. She stood beneath a flickering bus stop sign, its dying bulb stuttering against the gray. Her hair clung to her cheeks in damp strands, and she hugged her arms around herself as if holding her own sadness together. She didn't look like she belonged to the moment. She looked like someone who had wandered out of another story entirely, one written in soft tragedies and unspoken words. I should have walked past. I should have lowered my gaze and kept the fragile parts of me tucked away where no one could reach them. But something about the way she held herself, small, quiet, trembling in that barely noticeable way people tremble only when they are trying too hard not to, pulled me in. Then her eyes lifted. And everything else blurred. When our gazes met, it felt like the world inhaled sharply. A suspended breath. A quiet pull. A warning I mistook for fate. "Do you know if the next bus is late?" she asked. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, but underneath it was something stormy, something that hinted at a weight she carried alone. Raindrops slid off her lashes as she blinked up at me, and for a moment, I forgot how to speak. "It's delayed," I finally managed, clearing my throat. "The schedule says 5 minutes, but the weather probably added another 10. She nodded, looking away, her fingers tightening around the straps of her bag. I could see it then, the exhaustion she tried to hide. Not physical. Emotional. The kind that settles into your bones when you've been fighting invisible wars for too long. Without thinking, I tilted my umbrella toward her. "You can stand under this," I said. She blinked at me, startled. "Are you sure?" I nodded. And then she laughed, not loudly, not brightly, but softly, like she wasn't used to letting joy escape her chest. It wasn't just a laugh, it was a small, delicate sound that warmed the cold edges of the day. That sound slipped between my ribs and settled there, refusing to leave. "Thank you," she murmured. We stood side by side, sharing the slim circle of dry space beneath my worn-out umbrella. Our shoulders brushed, barely, but the contact was enough to send my pulse stumbling. I could smell faint traces of jasmine mixed with the clean scent of rainwater in her hair. It was strangely intoxicating, an impossible combination that anchored itself into my senses. After a moment, she sighed. "I don't think the bus is coming anytime soon." "No," I said before I could stop myself, "but I can walk you home if your place is nearby." She looked up at me again, searching for something in my expression. Doubt. Threat. Insincerity. She must have been used to all three. When she didn't find anything concerning, only nerves and sincerity, she nodded slowly. "All right." One word. But it felt like a door cracking open. The rain softened into a silver curtain as we walked. Puddles mirrored our steps, rippling beneath our reflections. For a few minutes, the only sounds were raindrops tapping the umbrella and the gentle rhythm of our footsteps. "So," she said quietly, "do you offer your umbrella to strangers often?" "No," I admitted. "Only the ones who look like they are fighting the weather and something else at the same time." She startled again at that, and her gaze flickered to me, almost wary, almost grateful. "You're observant." "Just terrible at minding my own business," I replied with a small laugh. She smiled, and the city brightened just a fraction. We passed shop windows glowing against the grey afternoon. A bakery releasing warm scents of cinnamon. A bookstore with fogged-up glass. She slowed near the window, eyes lingering on a display of handwritten letters penned in looping calligraphy. "I love letters," she whispered. "They feel gentler than words spoken out loud. Like they give you time to understand the truth behind them." It surprised me how easily she revealed pieces of herself. "It's rare," I said softly. "Most people avoid truth, written or spoken." Her lips curved as though she understood that statement too well. As we continued walking, she told me bits about her neighborhood, about the old cat that slept near her building, about how she preferred rainy days because they hid her emotions better. I didn't pry. Didn't ask why emotions needed hiding. I just listened. Every word she offered felt like a thread quietly tying her story to mine. By the time we reached her street, the rain had faded into mist. She stopped near a small apartment building with rusted numbers and a cracked flower pot by the door. "This is me," she said. I nodded, though a strange heaviness settled in my chest at the thought of parting so soon. She turned toward me, her eyes softer now, less guarded, maybe even a little thankful. "I never got your name," she said. "It's..." I told her. She repeated it gently, as though tasting its shape. "It suits you," she added. Her gaze dipped to the umbrella still held between us. Then, hesitating, she placed her hand lightly on my wrist. The touch was unexpectedly intimate, warm, delicate, fleeting. "Thank you for today," she whispered. "For the walk, and the umbrella, and the kindness." The kindness. As if it was something extraordinary instead of the bare minimum she deserved. I swallowed. "Anytime." She smiled again, small, brief, unforgettable, and stepped backward toward her building door. I stood there watching as she disappeared into the dim hallway, her silhouette swallowed by the flickering lights. The moment the door closed behind her, I felt something inside me shift. Something dangerous. Something hopeful. Walking home, I couldn't stop replaying her laugh, her voice, the brush of her shoulder against mine. Each memory felt like a spark that refused to die out, no matter how I tried to smother it. The city was still wet with rain, but everything felt strangely bright. Alive. Unsteady. I didn't know then how dangerous it was to let someone settle into your chest after just one meeting. I didn't know that her smile, gentle and trembling, would be the beginning of something that would unravel me, thread by thread. She felt like the start of a story. And I was right. Just not in the way I hoped. Because some beginnings aren't blessings. Some are warnings disguised as warmth. And I walked right into hers with open hands. We didn't grow close all at once. It happened quietly, gradually, like dusk slipping into night, so gentle that you don't notice the darkness until you're already standing in it. She and I drifted toward each other without meaning to, two shadows aligning under the same tired sky. She wasn't a talker. Most people fill silence like they're afraid of what might crawl out of it. But her silences were different. They spoke. They breathed. They trembled at the edges with things she wasn't ready to reveal. I learned to read her in ways that felt almost intimate. The slight tremor in her hands when something bothered her. The hollowed exhale when she pushed a thought too heavy to carry. The soft tilt of her head when she felt safe, an unconscious gesture, small and delicate, like a fragile bird landing on a branch. Every time she tilted her head that way toward me, something inside my chest warmed dangerously. We began spending evenings together, without planning to. She'd text me a simple, "Are you out?" or "I can't sleep." And I'd drop whatever I was doing because her presence, her warmth, felt like an orbit I couldn't pull away from. Sometimes we wandered aimlessly through the city, hands brushing but never fully holding. Neon signs glowed against the wet pavement, staining her cheeks with pink and blue. Street food vendors called out to us, and she'd always choose something simple: fish cakes, hot buns, cheap skewers. She'd take a bite, then nudge it toward me with a small smile, telling me it tasted better when shared. "It feels lighter with you," she said once, licking raindrops from her upper lip. "Like breathing doesn't hurt." I believed her. Back then, I believed every word she gave me, even the ones she whispered only to escape the weight she never allowed me to see. One night, we found an old sketch artist at a street fair. He painted portraits on scraps of cardstock lit by a single yellow lantern. "Let's get one," she suggested, tugging my sleeve. I shook my head. "I'm not good at sitting still." She smirked. "You sit still for me all the time." That comment, so casual, so softly spoken, hit deeper than she knew. We sat side by side as the artist worked. She leaned into me, just slightly, her hair brushing my jaw. The artist glanced up at us and said, "You two look like a quiet kind of love." She laughed at that. But it wasn't a denial. It wasn't an agreement either. It was something tangled between them, like she wanted the idea of love without the responsibility of holding it. When the portrait was done, it showed her smiling warmly and me looking at her instead of the sketchpad. "You look at me like that," she teased. "I don't," I lied. "You do," she whispered, folding the portrait carefully. "And I don't know what to do with that." Her voice carried a heaviness that slipped under my skin. I wanted to ask what she meant, why it bothered her, but her gaze dimmed with that same flicker of emptiness, and I swallowed the question instead. We walked home beneath a navy sky perforated with streetlights, her shoulder brushing mine every few steps. She hummed softly, a melody I didn't recognize. It sounded like longing. Or maybe loneliness pretending to be calm. There were moments with her that felt holy. We watched late-night movies in cramped theaters where the seats squeaked and the popcorn machine rattled like it was falling apart. She always chose sad films, stories about people trying to love but failing in beautiful, devastating ways. One night, halfway through a film, she leaned against me. Her head rested on my shoulder, her breath warm against my collarbone. The room was dark except for the flickering screen, and for a moment, it felt like she and I existed in our own little universe. Then she murmured, half asleep, "You have a heartbeat I want to memorize." My entire chest tightened. I thought that was love. I thought she was love. But looking back, I realized she didn't want my heart. She wanted refuge. She wanted quiet. She wanted distraction from storms I didn't understand. And I mistook her need for escape as need for me. One evening, we found ourselves sitting on a rooftop overlooking the city. She brought a small notebook, filled with poems she would never show anyone else. She let me read one, reluctantly. It was about a girl drowning in a glass room, screaming silently while everyone outside applauded her composure. "It's not about me," she said too quickly. Which meant it was. Rain clouds gathered above us, turning the sky into a bruise. She pulled her knees to her chest and stared at the horizon as if daring it to break. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I feel like I'm made of cracks. Like if someone loved me too much, I'd fall apart." "You don't have to be perfect to be loved," I told her. She didn't answer. She only leaned into me, and I wrapped my jacket around her shoulders. I thought that closeness meant she chose me. I thought she wanted me to keep her from breaking. But devotion becomes dangerous when it becomes one-sided. I gave her the deepest parts of myself without realizing she collected them carelessly, like borrowed objects she never intended to return. There were nights she would pull away unexpectedly, her gaze drifting somewhere I couldn't follow. Her voice would go distant, her expressions unreadable. I'd ask if she was okay. "I'm fine," she'd say. But her fingers would tremble. Her eyes would dim. Her walls would return. Still, I tried to hold on to her. Maybe too tightly. Maybe too desperately. But how do you save someone determined to drown quietly? One night, after walking her home, I reached for her hand. For the first time, she let me take it fully. Her palm was cold, her grip was faint. But she held on. "Why do you stay?" she asked suddenly. "What do you mean?" She looked at me with eyes that felt centuries old. "I'm not easy to keep. I'm not good for people." "I'll decide that," I said gently. She exhaled, shaky, almost broken. Then she pulled her hand away as if my kindness burned. "I don't want to owe anyone anything," she whispered. But I didn't hear the warning. Or maybe I didn't want to. Every night with her felt like a promise, even when nothing was said out loud. Her presence wrapped itself around my ribs, warm and soft and terrifying. I didn't realize she was already planning her escape. I didn't realize the quiet spaces between us were filled with secrets she would eventually weaponize. And I definitely didn't realize that the more I loved her, the easier I became to break. The rooftop lights flickered that night, casting shadows across her face. Shadows I should have noticed sooner. Shadows that hinted at the shattering yet to come. But she smiled softly, leaning her head on my shoulder again. And I, blind and hopeful, believed it meant we were safe. It happened on a Friday evening, the kind where everything feels slightly off-kilter but you can't explain why. The sky had already sunk into darkness when we arrived at the party, the moon slicing through clouds like it was too tired to glow fully. I remember thinking she looked beautiful in the elevator light, muted, thoughtful, leaning slightly into me as though the world outside still frightened her. But something in her posture felt distant. Barely noticeable. But enough to make the air between us feel thin. When the apartment door swung open, warmth and noise rushed at us like a wave. Music thumped from cheap speakers. Laughter spilled through the rooms, sticky and loud, clinging to the walls like cheap perfume. People greeted us, her more than me. She had a way of stepping into a space and making it feel like she belonged, even when she didn't believe it herself. I followed her closely, trying not to lose her in the crowd. Trying not to lose that fragile thread between us I had convinced myself was real. She moved through the living room with a soft smile, greeting her friends with that effortless charm I'd grown too fond of. I reached for her hand, a simple gesture, something natural after months of silent closeness. But she pulled away. Quickly. Quietly. Like my touch was something dangerous. I blinked, confused. "Are you okay?" She didn't look at me when she answered. "Yeah. Just, not really in the mood for touching right now." I swallowed the small sting inside my chest. I told myself she was shy. Overwhelmed. Not ready for public affection. But her hand stayed tucked behind her back like she was hiding it from me. The night unraveled slowly. People drifted in and out of conversations. Drinks were poured. Someone spilled wine on a rug and laughed too loudly. And she grew lighter with every passing minute, almost too light, like she was floating away from me inch by inch. Then it happened. We were standing near the kitchen island, pretending to listen to someone rambling about their new job. She looked bored, her fingers tapping against a glass. Someone, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of mischief, turned to us and asked, "So, are you two together?" A simple question. Harmless. One we weren't strangers to hearing in quieter, gentler contexts. But this time? She reacted like it was a trap snapping shut around her. Her laugh cut through the room, too loud, too sharp, too brittle to be real. It cracked something inside me the moment it left her lips. "Us?" she repeated, wiping non-existent tears from her eyes as if the idea alone amused her. "No. God, no. It's just convenient." The room stilled. But my heartbeat didn't. It thrashed violently, slamming against my ribs like it wanted to break free, or break me. Convenient. The word echoed, hollow, devastating. A detonation behind my sternum. Her friends exchanged looks. A few raised eyebrows. One person bit their lip, sensing the cruelty. Another looked away entirely, as if witnessing something intimate and ugly they weren't meant to see. And she wore a smile edged like a blade. Convenient. That single word reduced every late-night confession, every timid brush of her hand, every shared silence, every soft vulnerability she'd unfolded in my presence, into nothing. My throat tightened. "Hey, can we talk for a second?" I whispered, quietly, desperately. She took a sip of her drink, unbothered. "About what?" "About what you just said." She sighed, annoyed. "Don't start. You knew what this was." But I didn't. God, I didn't. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Is that really how you see me?" She shrugged, eyes drifting away like I was an inconvenience in that moment too. "Don't make this dramatic. It's just a party. People ask stupid questions." "It wasn't a stupid question," I said softly. "It was an honest one." "Then here's my honest answer," she replied, still not looking at me. "We're not together. We never were. And I don't want people assuming things." Her words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Not because they were cold, but because she delivered them like a practiced line, something she'd prepared in advance. I felt a sharp sting behind my ribs. A wound splitting open. "Convenient," I repeated, the word tasting like iron and rain. "Is that all I am to you?" She glanced at me then, briefly, unflinchingly. "Well, yeah. Kind of." Something in me cracked. I stepped back before I could crumble in front of her. The room felt too small, the air too thin. I needed oxygen, distance, anything that wasn't her dismissive gaze. I left the party early, slipping out before anyone could stop me. The night air felt colder than the apartment had. Rain began to fall, slow, deliberate drops that dampened my hair and clung to my eyelashes. Convenient. The word pulsed in my head with every footstep. As I walked, the city lights blurred into streaks of color through the raindrops coating my vision. My reflection appeared in shop windows, warped, watery, unfamiliar. I looked like a version of myself she had hollowed out without even trying. Every moment we'd shared replayed in my mind, each memory now sharp and painful. The rooftop confessions. The whispered vulnerabilities. The brush of her fingers. The fragile way she leaned into me when she pretended she wasn't hurting. Were all of those moments lies? Or were they truths she'd thrown away? The rain soaked through my sleeves, clinging to my skin like cold regret. I shoved my hands into my pockets, trying to anchor myself in something steadier than heartbreak. A bus rumbled past, splashing water along the curb. I remembered our first meeting. The umbrella. Her laugh. Her trembling silences. How had we ended up here, on opposite sides of a truth she carved into me with one careless sentence? Convenient. I stopped walking. The street light above me flickered, sputtering against the rain. My chest tightened, not with longing, but with clarity. That was the first time I felt the wound open. The first time I realized she didn't want me whole. She wanted me small. Quiet. Unassuming. Forgettable. Disposable. And the cruelest part? I had given her the ability to hurt me that deeply. I had handed her the blade with both hands. I stared at my blurred reflection in the darkened window of a closed shop. You mattered, I whispered to myself, voice shaking. You mattered, even if she refuses to see it. The words didn't heal anything. But they kept me standing. In that moment, cold, soaked, trembling, I made a silent promise. Not for revenge. Not for validation. But for myself. I wouldn't stay forgotten. I wouldn't remain a convenient shadow in her life. Because something inside me, something wounded and newly awake, finally realized the truth. She wanted to hurt my soul. But she had no idea what she had created in the process. The days after the betrayal were strangely quiet. Not peaceful, peace has a softness to it. This was numb. Muted. Like every emotion had been wrapped in thick gauze, smothered before it could fully form. I moved through my routine on autopilot, each day blending into the next with a dullness that frightened me more than anger ever could. I woke up. I showered. I dressed. I went to work. I came home. The world spun, and I simply existed on its surface. I didn't respond to her messages. Not the first one. Not the third. Not even the 10th. At first, her texts came like they always did, casual, expectant. Are you free? You're quiet today. We should talk. But she didn't try very hard. Because she assumed, confidently, arrogantly, that I'd return to her orbit the way I always did. She believed her gravity still worked on me. That the pull she once held over me was eternal. But something inside me had shifted. Not broken. Not vanished. Shifted. The wound she carved into me didn't close. Instead, it calcified, turning into something hard, reflective. A mirror I was finally willing to stare into without flinching. I saw myself clearly for the first time. Not as the spare piece in someone else's puzzle. Not as someone convenient. But as someone who had been giving, and giving, and giving. To a person who only knew how to take. So I began reclaiming the parts of me I had abandoned for her. My art was the first thing I touched again. The canvas felt foreign beneath my fingers, like a long-forgotten language I had to relearn. For weeks, I had painted nothing, not even aimless strokes. But one day, without planning to, I picked up a brush and let something inside me spill out. The result wasn't beautiful. It was raw. Dark. Violent in the way truth often is. But it was mine. Then came my health. The long walks I used to love. The quiet morning stretches. The late-night tea instead of late-night anxiety spirals. I began feeding my body in gentle ways, not because someone else might look at me and approve, but because I finally wanted to feel alive in my own skin again. I also started rebuilding friendships I had neglected while orbiting her gravitational pull. People noticed the shift. Co-workers commented on my renewed focus. Friends smiled more when they spoke to me, as if relieved to see me resurfacing. Even strangers seemed to respond differently to the steadiness I was relearning to wear. My world expanded where she had once narrowed it. Yet, even with all this healing, there were nights when her memory stung unexpectedly. A scent in the air. A song on the radio. A street we once walked together. But the pain didn't swallow me anymore. It reminded me, softly, firmly, of who I never wanted to be again. Weeks passed. Almost a month. And then, one evening, just as I was rinsing out a paintbrush, there was a knock at my door. A soft one. Familiar. Hesitant. My chest tightened, not with hope, but with the faint echo of who I used to be. When I opened the door, she was standing there. Her makeup was smudged, mascara streaked down her cheeks like cracked ink. Her hair was damp from the drizzle outside. She looked small, fragile, not unlike the girl I first saw beneath that flickering bus stop sign. Except this time, I recognized the performance in her trembling. She had worn this expression before, whenever she needed warmth to borrow. Whenever she wanted a place to set down her emotional baggage without unpacking it. "Can I come in?" she whispered. I didn't move. Didn't step aside. Didn't offer comfort. I only asked, "Why are you here?" Her lip trembled. I miss you." The words hit me like a soft blow, gentle enough to stir old memories, sharp enough to remind me how much they used to matter. But now? They felt late. Hollow. Echoes from a story I was no longer living. "I was scared," she continued, wiping her cheeks. "I didn't know how to love you properly. I didn't know what we were. I didn't know how to handle." "Me?" I asked quietly. "No," she whispered. "My feelings. They were overwhelming." I studied her. The girl who had once looked like a promise. The girl whose empty spaces I had tried so hard to fill. And I felt no anger. No longing. Just a strange, calm ache, like touching an old bruise and realizing it no longer hurts the way it used to. Once, her words would have undone me. I would have folded instantly, letting her back into my chest like a returning storm. But now? I felt grounded in a way that surprised even me. "I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just panicked. I push away anything that feels too real." I believed her. I did. But belief wasn't enough anymore. I stepped back, not to let her in, but to create space. Space for clarity. Space for the truth. "I'm not yours to hurt anymore," I said softly. She flinched, actually flinched, at the gentleness in my voice. Maybe she expected anger. Maybe she wanted it. Anger would have meant she still had power. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't hers. "I thought you'd come back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You always do." "Not this time." Her eyes filled again, a storm gathering. "Can't we try again?" "I'll do better this time. I promise." But promises from her were like handwritten letters left in the rain, pretty at first glance, blurred beyond recognition once they touched reality. "You wanted to hurt my soul," I said quietly. "But instead, you forged something you can't break anymore." She shook her head, stepping forward. "Please." "I forgive you," I said. And I meant it. But forgiveness wasn't an invitation. It was a door closing gently, not slamming. She realized it then. The finality. The boundary. Her breathing hitched. "So, this is it." "This is me choosing myself," I answered. The hallway light flickered above us, another quiet omen, another reminder of endings. She took a step back. Then another. Her expression crumbled like a collapsing sketch, all smudged lines and unfinished sorrow. When she turned away and walked down the hall, her footsteps sounded softer than they ever had. Like she was fading into a memory. I closed the door slowly. Not in anger. Not in triumph. But in peace. My closure wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was a quiet, steady truth. I had become the wound that never closed for her. And the scar that finally healed for me.